Hey guys, welcome back to the Thriving Love podcast, a podcast that challenges the status quo so couples can thrive as their most authentic selves. I'm your host, Sana, but today we have a very special guest, Chris Knight, the founder of Self Intelligence and a coach. He runs a community for humans to integrate all aspects of self and do the inner work together. Chris, welcome. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm excited to dive into your role today.
Pleasure. Thank you. I'm honored.
Yeah. So before we get started, what is self-intelligence and how would you define it?
Self-intelligence, I like to define it as the education about ourselves that we didn't get at school that impacts literally every aspect of your life, given that you are the common denominator of everything that happens in your world. What it does, just like any education, it encompasses knowledge and skills and habits that achieve a certain goal. And that goal is inner freedom, because it's becoming more and more clear. It's becoming almost obvious that happiness, fulfillment, freedom is an internal job primarily. When we are in the vibration of that, the external starts to manifest and reflect what that looks like. So there are a lot of people coming forward now, lots of those who we've looked up to inspired by, saying, look, all these achievements and all this success and all this stuff and all these things and all these possessions and relationships and all these things, they don't actually amount to what we're looking for. We weren't educated about that in clarity. Also, where the education is often shrouded in religiousness or sort of spiritual in ways that don't really resonate with the contemporary person. Do you know what I mean? Like gurus.
Definitely.
So what does inner work look like that's grounded and practical and life transformative, that is making its way into it as a foundational intelligence? Because we're intelligent about a lot of different things, but about ourselves, it's a very low intelligence, unfortunately.
There's so much that you said there that I just want to touch on real quick about just this aspect of external versus internal. And I think like religion and capitalism and patriarchy and all of these traditional and cultural systems that exist in today's society, they're meant to make you feel, especially also Western self-help industry, is I would put that right into this category.
Yep.
They're created to make you feel like you need something outside of you, like a god or things, material things, or even a program or a course that is going to fix you, because they want to keep selling you that you're broken and you're suffering, just the way religion does, just in a different package. And what I love about what you said is that we have the intelligence internally to feel whole and complete within, and we don't need anyone or anything externally in order to reach that place of self-intelligence.
Yes. Yeah. And there is the respect given to those, because I see it as a skill and I see it as a habit. I see skills and habits. And we know that skills and habits support us to do things we otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. And so that's the same thing applied to yourself. So you learn things. You become aware of things that weren't aware of. Like, for example, what's going on inside of us, right? Emotionally, the thoughts that are going on, the images in our mind, the voice in the head. So much is happening inside, and there's very little recognition that you're aware of what's happening inside. You can actually look at what's happening inside.
Yeah.
The current idea is that the inside is where it stops. Like, that's me. What those emotions and thoughts and voice, and that's who I am. And it's like, actually, no, you go deeper than that, and you can look at all of that and change. Choice is available to you when you realize your deeper, more fundamental nature that's prior to all of that stuff, which was assumed to be you, right? The person. This is who I am. And it's like, well, no, that's a product of conditioning and beliefs and all of these things, and that's manifesting. And the relationship conversation comes up for me probably the most of any topic, because this is where we discover so much about that inner world, either flowing and thriving in your relationship, or causing all sorts of grief and blockages and guardedness and triggers and all of that. And it's like, wait a second, is the relationship the problem primarily, or is there something for me to look at within myself that I didn't even know I could look at, that was even a possible thing to look at, to then go, oh, wow, this is not something that has to be something I have to live with for the rest of my life or keep doing over and over in relationship, and just essentially blaming the world and deciding that everyone's an asshole or, whatever it is. And it's like,
Yes.
right. So it's like, okay, there's a huge amount of empowerment that comes out of realizing who you really are beyond the person you believe yourself to be, and how that then manifests into your experience is just tremendous, right?
Would you say that the work required there is to detach from the ego in terms of being able to have that like separation between my thoughts and feelings and everything as who I am versus like who is that observer? Like how would you define like how, and same with relationships, right? Because I think the
Yeah.
ego is what protects us when it's like our partner's triggering us and
Mm.
we think it's the partner because our ego's trying to protect us and saying, oh, this person is making me do things and feel things that I don't want to do. So let's just say goodbye to this relationship and go back to our comfort zone.
Yeah.
So how would you define that? Like, is it a detachment from the ego or I
Yeah,
don't
okay.
know? Like,
Let's get clear about what ego is, because that
yes,
word gets thrown around a lot.
yes.
And in Western society, the idea of ego is like someone who thinks they're awesome, and this type of idea. Then there's a bit more of a spiritual idea, and there's different versions there. So when I use the word, just for clarification, is when you've identified with things that aren't you as you.
Mm.
Okay, so we do this side of our eyes, and we do this side of our eyes.
Oh, I
So
love that.
so this side of our eyes we can identify with jobs and possessions and roles and responsibilities, and that's who I am. I'm a mother, I'm a father, I'm a doctor, I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm whatever, I'm a gold medalist swimmer, I'm a whatever, right? So at that side of the eyes. And then on the inside you can identify with your values, your belief systems, your perceptions, your emotions, your intuitions, all of these things that that you are in fact the witness of, right? It's like that's what I felt, and that's therefore who I am, and that's me. Okay, but if
Mm.
you take a closer look at yourself over time, you'll see that that so-called person you believe yourself to be inside has changed quite a bit. So, for example, something that you decided you love, right? That's me. I love this thing. In 2 years' time, or even less, whatever it is, maybe something you're like, I don't resonate with that anymore. So it's not who you are, because if it was you, then you would have disappeared with a dislike as well. You would have come and gone with it.
Mm.
Sometimes you may have had a belief system that you're very strong about and identified with, like, and that thing has come and gone. But you didn't go, the belief system did, it came and gone. So ego to me is anything you identify with that is coming and going, that is not you.
Wow,
Okay.
I never thought about it that way. That's brilliant.
That's how I see it. Okay. Because you can
I
have a
love
lot of
that.
definitions for ego. There's so
I
many.
see what you're saying and my body is just saying yes, you
Okay.
know?
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So
Yeah.
so that resonates then, right? So that's what I mean by ego. Now, in relationship, and I feel as though the whole world is doing this. I call life school, right?
Yeah.
It seems to me that life school is doing whatever it can to show us we're not the things we believe ourselves to be. So it's like this opportunity to discover who you really are beyond the stuff, right?
Mm.
Internal and
Yeah.
external, both. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so the relationship comes in and it triggers that opportunity over and over and over again to discover this. Now we're either stubborn and we're going, no, this is me and this is who I am and I'm holding on to it, or we learn because it's threatening when you're triggered, right?
Yeah.
Depending on what the trigger is and the context of the trigger, and triggers is like my whole world, right? So when you, for
Same.
example, one of the modules in self-intelligence is triggers, right? How do you work with emotional triggers? How do you work when you're triggered by this situation? And every possible imaginable thing you can think of is what's covered. Okay, so relationships bring up triggers, and it's like I'm either going to protect and defend myself in this situation because maybe on a relative level that's important. There's also an opportunity there to discover what is it that's going on in me that I'm identified with that this is trying to teach me. to let go of. Because another tagline for self-intelligence could be the art of letting go, right? What are you letting go of? You're letting go of that false sense of self. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What is the false sense of self? Again, thoughts, beliefs, perceptions, emotions, physical body, also anything you've identified with. Anything you've identified,
Literally, yes.
right? Why is that so important? Because anything you identify with that is not who you really are creates suffering.
Mm-hmm.
It creates suffering because it's coming and going. So there's a need to cling to it, to attach to it, to try and control it, to mitigate the loss that would come from that thing.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think that the reason we attach to things is because we're always trying to have a sense of meaning and purpose around who we are? And I think that especially people who aren't aware of the inner work and the triggers and don't know how to navigate these things, I do you think that that's why we keep repeating these cycles of attaching to the things externally when we're trying to belong, I think, as humans.
Yeah, there's a lot to say there. There's a lot of different things that are relatively true, like belonging is true, right? That's a big driver of identity, right? I want to feel like I belong. And the
Mhm.
need, I put it in a need sense, okay?
Mm.
It's more accurate. I need to belong because there's a lacking quality to that need. Does that make sense? There's a clutching, there's a
Yes.
desperateness
Yeah.
to
Scarcity
that.
minds, like
Yeah.
mentality. Yeah.
So the ego state is by definition lacking. That's what's got to be understood. It can never be fulfilled or full or anything of that sort,
Agreed.
right?
Yeah.
So the idea from the ego is if I can get more things to attach to, I can be fulfilled. That's the idea of it. And that's what we're seeing going on. It's like I need more, I need more. If I have more, I will feel that sense of that void inside. The self-intelligence is realizing experientially, by the way, not as like an idea and a concept, because that doesn't do anything for anyone. It helps in the beginning, but not in reality, right? Is to realize I am the void that I'm avoiding. And when I'm in the recognition of that, I have these practices called self-recognition practices, right? Where
Right.
you every day sit in the recognition of who you are truly. And all you're at, and it's not something you make up. This is the important bit. It's not something you create or like
Mm.
imagine or anything. You don't try for a thing. You just are peace. You are love. You are truth. You are free. You are complete, not as an idea, as a fact. And the
How do you get to
fact,
that fact?
it's a simple thing. It's a matter of placing your attention back to yourself. So it's a matter of first discovering what you identify with and say it's the voice in the head and the images in the mind and the whole torrent. Have you ever done meditation, right?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so if you've done meditation, one of the first things you notice is you're being pulled into
Well, I guess
thoughts.
what I mean is I'm very familiar with all of that, right? But to me, what like it's similar to affirmations, right? Where it's how can you make that a tangible when your external reality is everything but.
Tell me,
So
yeah, give me an example.
so, for instance, I think the most common thread that I've been seeing in my clients, in the communities I'm interacting with, because I agree with you that once you come to this place of deep fulfillment from within and inner peace from within, your entire external reality shifts to make that true, right? You come to a place in your life also where you just feel like you can make it through the chaos that is around you in a much more mature way, in a grounded way.
Yes, and you're very practical.
Yes.
People are truly spiritual, so to speak, right? Are extremely practical. Not
Mm,
off the planet, not fluff, not like
yeah,
this, not irrational and throw caution to the wind. You're actually able to deal with the practicalities because you don't have the psychological nonsense of fear and attachment and neediness and all of these things as like a barrier to dealing with the practicalities. So
true.
I'm
Yeah,
extremely practical. Like I
yeah,
love
me
that.
too.
It's like it's the proof in the pudding. If it doesn't get to the practical, I'm not interested.
I agree.
it's just ideas and it sounds nice and, whatever, might feel good to hear. But does it help you do your tax returns? Does it help you clean your toilet? Does it help you deal with life? That's the only place this stuff's important to me,
Yeah. Well,
right?
I like to think of it as, for me at least, my greatest spiritual result of, like, if you were going to talk about like a destination, is
Yeah.
to find the most beauty in the mundane. To me,
Yes.
that's the most spiritual thing that I
Yeah.
have experienced, because I've always been the type of person who is searching, searching, searching for some grandiose thing, and then coming home to the realization that, wow, there is so much love and beauty and peace right here, right now.
Yes. Does that kind of answer then, in a way, in a roundabout way, like when you recognize who you are and you're at that place of peace, all of a sudden there is this capacity then to feel at ease in the mundaneness of life or the ordinariness of life. There's a just a capacity for that.
Yeah.
Whereas in the lack place, in the fear of being bored, in the fear of not being satisfied by external things, it's just one justifiable, delusional, grasping process after another. And relationships are fraught with that. Like, it's almost like one of the greatest playgrounds to project nonsense on each other. Like, I'm in the most tremendous relationship where there is literally no expectation. It's even hard to call it a relationship. It's almost better to call it like a sharing. Okay, so you're living in the ordinariness of everyday life and you're looking after yourself, and I'm doing the same, and we are sharing that with each other. And that's what's the relationship is called. Like, now it's called a relationship,
Love that.
right?
Mhm.
It is not the way that it's currently pursued, or there is no belief defining the idea of the relationship itself that creates those dramas, right? When my partner and I came together in this way, we wrote down and we got to like close to 80 beliefs that are in, say, monogamy or even polyamory. It doesn't matter, whatever the relationships are, and even family dynamics, all of them.
Mhm.
80 of the beliefs that cause the drama, right? And
Yeah.
and and essentially, just it was like a celebration of, is this possible that we're living beyond this? That we're literally living together, not in the trap
Traditional.
of
Mhm.
these ideas, right? And
Mm.
they're all unconscious and implied, projected and assumed, right? And it sounds like
Right.
people like yourself are starting to illuminate these ideas that are playing out in the background, causing so much grief in the foreground of our experiences, right?
Yeah, because when my husband and I first got married, we were very much in a very traditional marriage.
Yeah,
And what happened was, we fell under, like, we felt like this giant weight on our shoulders to fit into these gender roles. And it didn't feel authentic to who we were. And we sat down to question everything about
perfect.
everything, laid it all out on the table. And we're just like, what do we want to keep? What do we want to get rid of?
Love it.
And how can we move forward? And it sounds like that's kind of something what you and your partner did, in terms of, like, what are the traditional norms? What are the things that get people stuck in these cycles and patterns? And how are we transcending it ourselves so that we can educate others on it? Is that what it is?
100%. Like, because if you go back to, like, say there's essentially like a relationship trigger or problem, every time it'll scale back to some perception that has
Every
been
single time.
every single
Yes.
time. There's not
Yes.
a time it's not. It's like, this is the idea. If this happened, I'd have been happy, but it didn't. Or I'm trying to avoid this from happening, and everything about that person's behavior is telling me that that thing I don't want to happen is going to happen, and because of that, I'm not okay inside. This is essentially what's
Mm,
going on. This didn't happen, and I'm fearing that this will happen. Right? I want to avoid or control all of that. Okay. And if they would just get on board, then things are going to be okay. This is the idea, right?
yeah.
And
The
it's like,
trap.
that's the trap. And it's the idea is, well, they might be able to do that for a short period of time, but it's not going to be sustainable. And you're going to
Oof.
constantly be on the lookout for when things aren't going to go in the direction you think it has to in order to be happy inside. right? And they're now feeling kind of trapped and a bit controlled and now manipulated and gaslit and da da and all those terms that are going around. And now they're sort of like repulsed a little bit and getting more and more repulsed about being in this essentially fear-based dynamic that's disguised as
Mm,
love, because if you did this and you did that and you did this, then that would show me that you love me. It's like, is that what love is? That is not what love is. That is a nightmare
yeah.
disguised as reasonability. It would be reasonable if you did and met these so-called ideas that we have subscribed to and all of us have been born into and experienced from our own parents and TV and everything. Like it's one big idea of normal that's insane because we
So,
don't question it. It's not
yeah.
questioned, right?
You mentioned something off screen about uncoupled love. And, what is that? Like, how would you define it? And I
Well,
just want to know more.
that was just the words that came, that when my current partner and I came together, that was just the words that manifested, because I've been in so many relationships and really deep ones and like 14-year long and like had the family, like I've
Wow.
been
Oh,
there,
wow.
right? And prior to that 5-year relationship, prior to that 15 months and da da da, and like I've done relationships, I've gone there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they all had this kind of sense of, there's this implied agreement that goes on, that's a part of, like, when we're a couple, this is the implied agreement. It's never written out, or it's just there as like this sense of, and you essentially find out what the agreement is whenever you do whatever wrong, like then you find out what the agreement is. It's like, then it comes up and it's like, oh, now I get where I stand in this relationship and
Mm,
what's expected and not expected. And this is normal. This is normal. This is what everyone's doing. But when we came together, I'm like, all this is love shared. I don't feel like we're a couple. Like, I know the feeling like when I'm a couple with someone, like we're a couple, this kind of feeling, you know,
what's the difference?
ownership generally, a sense
Yeah.
of ownership, like, and identity,
Mm,
you know, there's that in there as well. Whereas in the current relationship that I'm in, there's just this pure, and it's so innocent and so ordinary too, right? Just love shared. And so what that looks like is this immense capacity for radical honesty and for listening, like real listening. Because when I speak to my partner, I'm just expressing myself. It's not going up against her idea of relationship and what she wants from me, right?
yeah.
So, and
There's
and
a
I'm like,
presence there, like a
yeah,
presence of like truly listening, truly being
truly
there.
listening, true listening. Because when you talk to someone, you're not quite being listened to unless you're kind of saying something that they want out of what you're saying, right? It's kind of like got this. There's an exchange. It's that
They're
type
usually
of
listening
thing.
to respond versus listening to just truly listen.
Yes, yes, and
That
and
was me
so
for a long time. I
and
still do
say
that sometimes.
And the same with me though. Like I had that the whole time that I was in relationships. I had my agenda, they had their agenda, and we kind of would compromise to find each other somewhere in the middle to try to like go, well, you get a bit of what you want, I get a bit of what I want. It kind of was like that. And if we can sustain that as long as we can, then we can. If we can't, then we can't. It was like this. But this is totally like not that. So the only way that I could express it is like, it's like we're a couple, but we're not a couple. So it was uncoupled, right? It was like uncoupled love, right?
Does that mean your relationship's like open to others as well, or is that something you guys have discussed? Or
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So in the beginning, it was discussed. I certainly felt as though one of the pitfalls of relationships was to, for me, I don't know if this is necessary for anybody else, but it felt to me that there was a game that would get played and there would be inherent insecurity in the idea that you could control each other's sexuality and so on. So I said, look, this is open for me. I can be with anybody I want to be with, and you can be with anyone you want to be with. I want to share my love with you. That's all I know in this point in time. And they were okay with that. And I haven't even thought about another person. Like it
yeah,
hasn't even come up as a thing. It's like I knew it would take it off the table. It's like for me, it was like, well, I don't even want that to be a barrier or an area to rebel against or like have some kind of like
yeah.
delusions of freedom and I can have sex with her. Why don't I just give myself that freedom and then just let it
Hmm.
go? Because it's not, again, highly practical to, for me at least, with my life, to be having
I
relationships
know.
with other people. I don't have time
Seems
for
like
that.
a lot of
You
time
know,
and energy.
yeah, it does. I just don't have time for that. But in the case that something flowed in that way, I don't want there to be the restriction. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I don't want there to be the psychological fears around that and the jealousies and I'm like, look, I'm not doing that whole thing. I've
Yeah.
tried it before and I've noticed it almost like it draws its own problem without even having one. So let's just not make it a problem to start.
Hmm.
So for me, in my experience, it's an open relationship if you want to put it like that, because it's not a relationship in the conventional sense that you would think about it, but it hasn't led to being with other people and I don't think about it. It doesn't come up as a thing.
Yeah.
We spend all our time together. We work together. We live together. We're like each other's best friend and each other. We create together literally every single day. Yeah, it's just what it
That's
is,
beautiful.
right?
Yeah.
It's like it's a full celebration. Like it's incredible. And we both had no idea it was possible, but from based on our conditioning, and based on our past experiences of being in a relationship, we're sort of used to the usual kind of process of being with someone and essentially tolerating them as best you can. Like,
I get
if you
it.
get the, it's
Yes.
like if you get the best catch you can possibly get, you may be able to tolerate it for the longest distance before you essentially fail or something. It's like that whole paradigm I kind of subscribed to. I was like, well, maybe that's just how it goes. And that's what I've experienced, even though the love that I experienced with my past partner was tremendous. I wouldn't be where I am today with the relationship I'm in today if it wasn't for the depth of
Yeah.
connection I had with those past partners. It was like,
Mm.
it was that classic first love kind of thing. It was deeply intense connections. It wasn't like, oh, these were people I didn't really connect with and didn't vibe with, or not like that at all. Like they could have been, any one of them could have been life partners, right? But for me, something was off, something didn't feel true. And what
Mm.
I realized that was relationship itself was prized as the goal. Like it was like the centerpiece in the connection I have now is who I am is the centerpiece, and who she is the centerpiece, and who she is and I am at the level that we are speaking is the one. So we meet in this space where we can deeply, deeply trust each other. We are not turning relationship into a god or a dogma or
Mm.
something followed that becomes toxic. And there's so much, I'm so
I
passionate
love
about
that.
it because I live in it every day, and we both work with relationship challenges, daily, right? And we
Same.
just,
Yeah.
every time we come out of it, we're just like, wow, so happy, so happy
Same. Oh
not
my
to
God.
be
It makes me
living.
appreciate my man so much.
It's like,
I swear,
it's
every time I hang out with my girlfriends and then I come home, I'm just like, wow, thank God.
exactly,
What
exactly.
you're saying, I feel it very deeply. So I have a podcast episode, I believe it's the second one. It's called Untethered Love. So
Oh,
if you get a
perfect.
chance to
Like
listen
the
to
untethered
it,
soul. Yes, yes.
yes, exactly, exactly. So that's the concept behind it, where, you're not your past, you're not your relationship patterns. You are coming into a union with the intention of setting each other free. How
Yes.
can I help you? How can not help in as in heal or coach or
Yep.
anything like that, but how can I create an environment for you to continue on the journey of letting down your guards and opening your heart as much as possible in this lifetime that we share together. And
Yes. And it has nothing to do with my agenda for you, for
no,
me.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
And you
it's
know
simply
what?
because we're doing this thing called life together, so we might as well help each other if and when we can.
Exactly, exactly. Because you've
Yeah.
got to come to the realization the false sense of ideas of, security in a relationship just don't exist. Like in Australia, I think it's
Mhm.
1 in 2 marriages divorce, for example.
Oof.
Like where can you
It's
find,
crazy.
yeah, where
Yes.
can you find the idea of stability in that? That is not, it's just
Mm,
insane that we keep trying for this. So it's like, we've got to
interesting.
try something different. And the difference is what we're talking about here. But we know for both of us that the reason that it works is because the primary is where the primary is supposed to be, and the secondary is where the secondary is supposed to be
In both of your lives. There's
in
no
both of
like
our lives simultaneous.
power trip or
Yeah.
power struggle in that dynamic. So, what would you say to people right now that are listening? There's a lot of people in my world that I see. So, I think your wisdom can be incredibly valuable for them who are stuck in the social media lessons of the divine masculine versus divine feminine
Ah,
dynamics.
yes, 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 yeah. Yeah,
Because it sounds like you have transcended that
yeah,
for
yeah. I
sure.
don't even think about that. But it has its place. Like everything has its place, right? So
Yeah.
I understand why that stuff is going out there. It tends to be another adding process. So everything's self-intelligence. So you can feel the vibration of it. Everything self-intelligence is a removal process.
Yeah.
Okay, it's like a purification. It's just removing and coming back to the natural, right?
Yeah.
Whereas when you hear a lot about what you get hearing on social media and different relationship ideas and what da da da, if you feel into the vibration of it, it's like you've got to add something.
Mm.
So to get in balance with my masculine, I need to do this thing and that thing and embody this thing and do this thing in order to be in my masculine. Now I'm the right balance or the right partner or the right attraction will like happen, blah, 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 blah. It's like I've got to become something. Whereas what we're doing and experiencing is if you remove those ideas, the natural expression of your exact spectrum of masculine and feminine will
Mhm.
naturally come out of you because there's nothing in the way of it.
Oof, yes.
There's nothing in it.
Yes.
It's so naturally you. You don't have to look after it and like contrive it to be something.
And I think
However,
it
in
goes
saying
back.
that, let me say
Yeah.
this though. Let me say this
Okay.
because when people do masculine and feminine work, it does allow people to be okay with those expressions. Like sometimes it helps them release those beliefs because they're like, oh, wow, I do feel like this. And it wasn't
Mm.
until I did this workshop or this thing or whatever the case is that now I feel it's okay for me to let that out of me. Whereas before I felt it wasn't allowed or it was a problem or it was
Right.
threatening or whatever the case. So this is why I do see the value in it.
Mhm.
However, if it is primary, again, if it is primary, you always feel somewhat insecure or lost in it. It's like I don't know if I've got it quite right, or maybe I could have it a bit better, or da 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 like this. And it's like if that is happening, then you know you've put it as the top where it's not the top. It's down the way. The top is you, pure consciousness awareness, the which is essentially what gets you back in touch with your core essence and expression in this life, which will naturally flow out through you. So the
Oh, I love
masculine
that.
feminine
Yeah.
dynamic, for example, will naturally flow out. And from there, if that's your primary, you can then go, oh, I'm really curious about this workshop on masculine, feminine, or whatever. And it will be
Mm.
so complementary to you. It will be so supportive to you because it's not turning itself into the primary. Does that make
I
sense?
think it does. It sounds like what you're saying is let the perfect, like the thing that's meant for you, you will attract it when you are doing the self-intelligence work versus seeking and searching for the answers outside of you to fit a mold of what you think it's supposed to be or you're supposed to look like
Yeah, because
or
guess what?
act.
You're
Yeah.
going to do, if you did 3 different masculine, feminine workshops, they're all going to say something different.
Yeah.
So in your mind, you're going to be like, which one am I supposed to be? What? Wait. Which one am I supposed to be listening to? I was told this was the
Totally.
way, this was the. It's like, you're not going to be able to discern from there. Right?
Mm.
Come home to yourself. Because when we use the word self intelligence, that's all that means. Recognize yourself.
Yeah.
Now, do we might need to be clear about that. Like, we might
Yeah.
need to be clear about that. So, recognize yourself. Because as soon as I say recognize yourself, most people are thinking the person inside is recognizing myself. Like, I'm a
Mhm.
person inside and I'm recognizing me, the person inside. No, you're
Yeah.
not. You're recognizing you are the consciousness. Then you can go to all 3 of those workshops who all are saying different things and you'll get the benefit of all of them
Mm. Oh,
because
that's so beautiful.
they're not primary. This is why we make cults out of things and like have to get so stuck in beliefs. And so, like, for example, when it comes to diet or comes to stay on relationship, I mean, how many different pieces of an opinions that people are getting about what they should and shouldn't be doing. Now,
So
this is
many.
how many men I've worked with, for example, who love the work that we do and love working with Tess. That's my partner, right? They love working with her. because they go, my partner has dragged me to these counselors and psychologists and relationship coaches. And all I felt like, I don't know how to describe it, but I felt like they're being ganging up on me. Like they too know what they want and they're ganging up on me to get me to do something that I should be doing, kind of thing. It's like, yeah, we don't do that.
No. Yeah.
We've removed should, shouldn't,
Yeah.
right? And that plays it's so tricky, but it gets into the spiritual worlds, it gets into the relationship coaching and all this kind of thing. It's this subtle, very reasonable too. So everyone will agree, a very reasonable should or shouldn't that then has to get subscribed to and believed in, and then you end up having to let it go. You end up
Yeah.
having to let it go because it doesn't. It's not sustainable,
Yes, exactly.
right?
So the way I see it is there's, I guess, a time and place for that. When you don't have self trust, you don't have discernment, you don't have a connection to yourself, and you are completely trying to figure out where to start. And then you come to a place, I think, for me at least, is like you enter a place of saying, okay, the women's circles, maybe that was needed at a certain time in my life. And now it's time for me to listen to my own inner voice, my own inner wisdom. And it's kind of like, for me, what I like to say is step one is the awareness. You're paying attention to everything that is calling to you, that you're interested in, that you're intrigued by. And then it's kind of like now it's time for the integration where you pick what you want to keep with you, what resonates, what doesn't, what resonates, what doesn't. And it's
Yes.
just like ever going in and out flow because you are listening to that inner voice and you're getting connected to that self trust and your gut and your intuition and your body's cues of what is my body having a reaction towards, why is this reaction here, what
Yeah.
is this reaction trying to tell me, and picking up the lessons. And then the third step for me is the embodiment of it. Okay, now that I know what is for me and what isn't, how can I present myself in my external reality as somebody with the wisdom embodied into my reality?
Yes. Yeah. That's certainly we both have the same step at the beginning, which is awareness. And you were saying awareness of the things that you're curious about, right? Is it sort of awareness of
Yeah.
yourself and awareness of that inner voice and things like this? Yeah.
I guess just like whatever is sparking an interest, because
Yes.
I'm a emotionally driven person for sure. So
Yep.
like even if it's something that I don't think it will resonate with me, but if the curiosity is still there, I'll still read the book. I'll still like check out the content. I'll still
Yes.
explore it because I also never want to be somebody who is closed-minded in a sense of that's not for me. I'm not interested. But I feel like if it's evoking an emotion, whether it's strongly on either side, positive or negative, there's something there for me to look at. If I had
Okay.
neutrality at it towards it, I would know it's not for me.
Right. Okay. So the approach that is self-intelligence is starts at awareness
Mm-hmm.
in the recognition that you are awareness.
Mm.
So not aware of, but just being in the recognition. Like we can even do this now, right? Even as we're speaking, and even as I'm speaking in this moment, I'm aware of what I'm saying. And even if I have an emotion about something, for example, if I was curious about something and I had an emotion about something, prior to the emotion and what is allowing the emotion to even exist at all is the fact that I'm the awareness of that emotion. So I can say to you, I had a really strong emotional pull about that, right? I can report on this because I'm aware of it. And this recognition is something that people are doing unconsciously, or some are becoming more conscious of it. When you let yourself be with the recognition that and just sit in the pure awareness that is there, then what you're saying becomes so natural because what resonates with you is so clear. And so
Yeah.
you can go, yes, I know that's for me, and I don't, and I know that's not for me, and so
Mm.
on, because you're not clouded by what usually goes in front of awareness, which is the conditioned self, which is who I should be and shouldn't be and what's normal and what people accept and not accept and all of this, right? This is the conditioned version, which is the ego self, if you like, as well. And now it is making that decision to go toward that thing I was curious about difficult. Now that I'm
Mm.
conflicted, I don't know if I should. I don't know what to do exactly. And now I'm questioning myself. And oh God, what's the point? I mean, how useful was it to do that? Uncomfortable. Leave it alone, right? Where what you're saying is, I've got the courage and and enough stillness within myself to go, no, I know when something's for me. And how important this is becoming in the world right now, where we have infinite choices, right? We have so many
Mm.
things to tune in with and resonate with. And if we're coming from the conditioned place, the manifestation of that is overwhelm, is stress, is anxiety, is depression, is feeling blocked, is, and then of course to deal with all those uncomfortable feelings comes all of the behaviors. And
Yeah.
that comes in the form of distractions and addictions and so on. It's like, I can't handle all of this, right? So,
Yeah.
what you're saying is so important, to be able to know for yourself when that's the case, and not to be able to second guessing constantly, and this analysis paralysis, and yeah,
What
all of
would you
that comes
recommend
with
for
it.
people to do when they are in that space? Because I know a lot of people that feel that way,
Yeah,
who are really wanting change, wanting, are ready, right? They're like, I'm ready. I just need to know how to listen to my inner wisdom, because they are clouded by the fear, or clouded by,
yes.
they've made so many mistakes. They have so much shame and guilt, and they are so scared to trust themselves.
Oh man. Well, I can
Yeah.
only speak from my own experience, because I come exactly from that.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
coming from that. I came from huge amounts of mistrust with myself after addictions, and there's a whole life story. But essentially, I got into the full dark night. It was a hell pit, and I was even on my way to prison. Essentially, at one point, it was
Wow.
that destructive, right? And from there, I was called home to myself through what was at that time meditation with a man named Lama Chodek Rinpoche. He actually went to school with the Dalai Lama, and he
Oh,
was kicked out of Tibet with the whole situation they had there, and he landed in Canberra, where I was at the time, and I did a course with him, and for the first time I was shown how to come home to myself,
that's
and
beautiful.
it was hard. It was hard
Yeah.
work. I was like, this is challenging, to bring my attention back to myself, to rest in the essential nature of myself, that's not this personal story, and be with that. Just be with that. That's it. It's like, what else? Like, surely something. No, 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 no. Just stop and be with this, right?
Oof, yes.
And you are now purifying naturally, not because you are telling yourself a good person, or you're doing good deeds and justifying yourself as a good person in the world, so you're dealing with all your shame and all your regrets. No, you are purifying in the fact of yourself. You are
Mm.
not this story. This is you. Pure consciousness, awareness, as a fact, not as an idea. And this is where I first started. So I'd say to anybody, when you first start, is to be prepared to work, right? To be prepared to be
And that work
confronted.
isn't work in the way that they would think it is. It truly, the work is to not work.
Yes,
It
okay. Let me give you a metaphor. Let me give you a
Yeah.
metaphor so that makes sense. I often give a metaphor of, if you're afraid of abseiling. Have you ever done abseiling before?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so that's where you're in a harness and you've got a rope and you're going off a cliff.
Okay. Yes. I
Abseiling,
haven't
yeah?
done it, but yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
so a lot of people are terrified of heights, right? And they cognitively know they're safe. Like, there's ropes and the person set it up and there's a
Mm.
harness, and but the fear part is the height, and it's like, I shouldn't be here, right? And it's scary. But you let yourself edge your way off, and down you go. Now if you stopped for a moment halfway down the cliff, there might be 20 more meters to go, and it's like, what am I doing here? So this is life, okay? This is life right here. And it's like, the work is you're holding on to those ropes like this, right? But I want you to see that you're in a harness and the harness has got you.
Oof, yes.
And you're going, no, 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 no. I've got to keep in control of this, right? I've got to hold
Mm,
on to this for dear life. It's like, no, no, no. Yes, I get that. The inner work is you letting
letting go.
go into the harness, just relaxing. So when you say, so that takes work. It's like you've got to be
Yeah.
willing to pry each finger off that rope, right? You've got to
No,
be
you're
willing
right.
to
I mean,
do that.
I trust me. I know it's work because I've done it. I've also had to experience a very massive dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
For me, my work was not reaching for the distractions when all I wanted to do was run away
Yeah.
from what was coming up.
Big time. So a distraction, if become aware of, which you would become aware of,
Hmm.
is to so if I'm not in the distraction, then where do I go? You see, how am I letting go? Where am I letting go to exactly? This
Hmm.
is where being just still with yourself becomes so important as a knowing that anytime I can be there, it's fine.
Yeah.
I don't have to be doing this thing to survive and cope. You see, but if you don't have that reference, if you don't have that knowing that there's a harness, how can you? It's like impossible.
I don't think I knew that there was a harness. I think I just became so desperate for change and
Yes.
sick of myself. And just like, I think I was willing to die completely. I think that's what it was. Where
Yeah.
I was just willing to be like, the fear goes away, I think, not in the sense of completely going away, but in the sense of you just make so much peace with that fear of, well, I know the way I'm living right now. I'm hurting everybody around me. I'm hurting myself.
Yeah.
It's just not the life that I want to live. And I'd rather do anything that I can to change. And if that means sitting in the depths and feeling completely miserable, and it's kind of like that self punishment in a way that, like, but then on the other side of that, you just have so much calmness and bliss. And, I do believe that God came to me in that moment of full surrender of I think I hate saying that it takes a suffering in order to meet yourself, but I think it's true.
It's a pretty common, it's a very, at least I don't think it's essential. It's just that it's extremely common,
Mm,
so because if you can maintain your delusions, why would you take the risk of letting them go if you can maintain them? That would be a phenomenal degree of wisdom to do that. It's generally when they have to be ripped out of your hands,
yeah.
so the first step I say is to discover peace just being, right, which
Mm,
often involves like a version of meditation. From there are a few key steps, right? Understand your mind. So when we go through trigger work, the process is to have a situation and then understand how you make a situation a problem, and really understand this, and
yeah.
see how the mind works to do that. This is then becomes like this massive revealer that wasn't there before. I make situations a problem, and not me the person or me who I fundamentally am, but this is just mind works like this, right? So
Mm,
understanding your mind and how it reacts to things is extremely important, because it makes it, whatever it says in terms of that problem, I call it problem consciousness, is believed to be a fact. It's not seen as something that is up for question.
yeah.
It's not seen as something that is actually passing and going and is completely irrelevant and doesn't matter. It's believed to be a fact, and therefore reactions and actions and responses and so on are necessary, right? So if you don't understand and have a certain degree of awareness of your mind, you essentially are going to believe whatever it says. And so the
And that's a
meditation
dangerous
aspect,
place to be.
well, yeah, yeah, and the whole world is in that, right? You can
Yeah.
see it. Humanity is in that evolutionary step. It's
Yes.
just in that step of realizing you're not your mind. So how do you discover that? You see,
Mm,
I see the two: discover who you are beyond the mind as an experience, not an idea, and be with that. Like marinate yourself in yourself, and then learn about how the mind really works. Because It's not even taught in psychology. It's not
I
taught
know, it's
there either.
wild. Mhm.
It's so people who come to us, they go, I've learned more from you guys than all the psychology sessions I've ever done. And I'm not saying that's to say that about the whole of all psychologists or anything, because
No, but I
there's
hear you
amazing
because I
work
meet a
coming out of
lot
it.
of psychologists who are leaving the practice to find a
Yes.
more holistic and spiritual approach.
Yes. The body, the body is a reflection of the internal you take. So the
Mhm.
person you take inside, the body reflects that. So if you're a lacking, desperate person in some ways, and whatever the case is, whatever shape you take inside, the body takes that shape.
Yeah.
So when people say the emotions are trapped in the body, I don't agree with that. To me, it's the body, the emotions are trapped in the shape you take as the person inside, and the body is expressing that.
Yeah.
And as soon as you stop taking shape as that person inside, as soon as you realize who you really are and you learn how to do that, that shape dissolves, and so does with it all of the stuff the body was holding on to.
That's fascinating. I actually have to dive into that deeper because I've never heard of it being explained that way before.
I used to teach, and I still do, emotional anatomy. So
Oh,
I've taught people all
okay.
over the world emotional anatomy,
Amazing.
which is the body mind connection. And throughout that time, it became very clear, and through my own experience, working at the level of identity is where you shift the physical issues for good.
Mhm.
So you can go from the physical, because that will happen. That will reflect on that internal space. It can work both ways. But
Oh,
what's happened at
interesting.
the end of the day in both is that you're not taking shape as that person anymore. That
Interesting.
insecure
Yeah.
person,
The
that
identity.
that
Mhm.
identity that you were taking on has shifted, and now there's this feeling of lightness, and there's this feeling of, well, what's essentially happened is the absence of fear has happened. Somehow fear has been removed. The fight flight freeze response, which manifests in the body as the dysfunctions that we experience and symptoms, is no
Mhm.
longer taking place. So it's a very practical understanding of how all that comes together. And relationships are just another thing to look at as the shape that you're taking, because the way that they manifest is a reflection of yourself internally. And it's like, I'm so
Yeah.
sick of seeing this reflection. And it's like, well, if the mirror's frowning at you, you don't change what's happening on the mirror, you change yourself, and the mirror will reflect something different.
So true.
That's the whole kind of, yeah, that's the process, and that's
Amazing.
what self-intelligence is working at that level. I'm willing to shift my sense of self, as in like the false sense of self. You cannot shift who you are, because who you are is unchanging. It's it doesn't have that sort of movement. So yeah.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for your brilliance today. I know I have learned a ton and I can't wait to post this episode for everybody else to tune into. And I hope they receive their nuggets of wisdom from you as well. How
Absolutely.
can my audience work with you and find you? Your links will be below, your website and social handles will all be linked. But what are some things you have going on in your world?
There's a wake up experience, which is like a free introduction, that really spells everything out in a really clear fashion, and it gives you an experience of who you truly are, and it goes through the whole problem, and the human condition, and really spells it out in a really practical and, yeah, beautiful way, as an introduction. And what that's designed for is, if you resonate, if something in you like resonates with that message, I have a community, called the Self Intelligence Community, who they come together with me every single week, and they essentially, have access to a whole bunch of courses that are a part of that community. So
Awesome.
there's the self intelligence coursework, and it's a really, really affordable, membership fee, where you get access to this stuff, and you have my live support and guidance as you're going through these, learning processes in a self-paced kind of way. So
Oh, wow.
anybody can join anytime and start developing self-intelligence that will literally transform every aspect of your life. It's an inside out job, and it's happening on the globe. I'm seeing a lot of these different communities becoming available where we can empower ourselves wherever we resonate, wherever we're curious, like you were saying before.
Yes.
If that curiosity is there, I would say try it. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars anymore to discover these things, right? It's like,
So
what,
true.
$23 a week and I can change my life? Like, what is that? You know, I'm in Australia
Agree.
as well, so it's even better for
Yeah.
people if your audience is in America. And I have several people from America in the community, because
Awesome.
the times work. But yeah, and it's instant. You know, you're not waiting for months and months for something to start and so on. It's like,
That's
if you're
incredible.
feeling the call, then get on board. So yeah, I'll give you those links, and yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much again for being here. And I hope you'll be back and we can dive into some more topics.
Oh, I think so. I'd be more than happy to do that. Yeah, thank you so much for letting me speak and yeah, share this work. And thank you for listening to your heart, because it takes a lot of work and dedication to do what you're doing. So I really
Thank you.
appreciate you. Yeah.